Independent Senator Bernie Sanders is making his cycle debut. Senator, welcome to the show. We played the clip there from Leader Pelosi. She also, though, made a little news today saying that she would be open to this idea of a benefits reduction in Social Security. Chain CPI is what it's called. That's part of a grand bargain. And, of course, President Obama has been pursuing this grand bargain, the idea of replacing the sequester with cuts to Social Security, maybe tweaks to Medicare, and then more revenue. That's sort of the grand bargain idea. Fair or not, it seems like the leaders of your party are sort of putting all these discussions on a binary track where the decision is going to be either we stick with the sequester or we have the grand bargain. And I guess I'm curious from your perspective, if those are your two choices, which would you prefer?
Well, they're not my two choices, and I just came from 3 hours at a budget committee meeting. I will be returning to a budget committee meeting. We are working on a major budget which will protect the American people, which will do away with a lot of the loopholes, which will be a real contrast to Congressman Ryan's disastrous budget, which will make devastating cuts for working families and low-income families while lowering taxes for the wealthiest people of the country at a time when the rich are doing phenomenally well and when 1 out of 4 major corporations is paying nothing in taxes. So my hope is that we can, in fact, develop a strong budget which is based on revenue and judicious cuts and protect working families in this country.
Sure, and I understand that. I guess when I see the top Democrat in the House and somebody with a lot of credibility on the left and with progressives saying now that she's open to chain CPI, it does raise the prospect of, hey, that if Obama, if Republican leaders get to a deal, it's going to include chain CPI or something along those lines. I guess, would you, as a senator, if it comes to that, if that becomes the deal that they all work out, would you use the power of filibuster, do you feel strongly enough, to stop anything that touches entitlements?
Well, I don't want to speculate on a hypothetical, but this is what I can tell you, and everybody has got to know it. The so-called chain CPI would mean that if you're 65 years of age today, by the time you're 75, you're going to get $650 a year less than you otherwise would have gotten. By the time you're 85, $1,000 a year less. If you're a senior citizen in the state of Vermont trying to live on $15,000 a year, that's a devastating cut. And let me also say, as chairman of the Senate Veterans Committee, this will mean devastating cuts for disabled vets, for widows who lost their husbands in Iraq and Afghanistan. It is not my view that the American people want to balance the budget on the backs of disabled vets. So I'm going to fight this. We have on our side, we have every veterans organization in this country, every senior organization in this country, the National Organization for Women and disability groups as well. People want to do deficit reduction, but you've got to do it in a way that's fair, not on the backs of the vulnerable.
Senator, I agree with that. It's an honor to have you on the show. And this is not just about an economic conversation. It's about a values conversation. It's about who we are as a society. And if we have a civilized society that doesn't require collective commitment, that doesn't have a safety net for those who are the least fortunate, then we're not really a society. We're just a collective of, several million people who just live here together. But don't we have to live together and have a collective commitment to have a true civilization?
Look, that is exactly right. The question is whether or not we are a nation. You know, as chairman of the Veterans Committee, I talked to people who went to Iraq and Afghanistan who came back without any legs. That's a sacrifice. And then when I hear that you have some of the largest financial institutions in this country, Bank of America and others, who have hundreds of subsidiaries in the Cayman Islands in order to avoid paying any taxes in the United States of America. And then I have people who say, well, you got to cut Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and education and nutrition, even though 22% of our kids are living in poverty. I think your point is exactly right. Are we a nation, or are we moving, in fact, to an oligarchic form of society where a handful of people on the top have it all, middle class declines, poverty stays at a very high level?
Well, and Senator, what do you say to those who call both the Paul Ryan House Republican budget and the Senate Democratic budget political documents that have no chance really of passing, that they're not serious? Is that a fair comparison to make between these two budgets?
I wouldn't phrase it that way. I mean, what we are seeing right now is a major ideological and philosophical divide in this country, which is greater today than at any time, I suspect, since the late 1920s or maybe the 1932 election. What Ryan is about is saying that we are not going to raise a nickel more in revenue. In fact, we're going to lower tax breaks for the wealthiest people in this country, and we are going to make devastating cuts for working families who are already suffering in the midst of a recession. What we are trying to do, and I would go a lot further than Patty Murray did, but I'm supporting her budget, is to say, first of all, we got 14% of our people who are unemployed. If you look at unemployment in a real way, we got to create jobs. We're putting $100 billion into rebuilding our infrastructure, create jobs, deal with youth unemployment. And second of all, it is insane to simply talk about cut, cut, cut when you got the wealthiest people and large corporations doing phenomenally well and paying lower effective tax rates than they should. So I think the point that you made earlier about whether we are a nation, we send kids off to Iraq, lose their legs, they defend our country, and you got large corporations who are not paying a nickel in taxes. That's not what a nation, that's not what shared sacrifice is about.
Senator, President Obama's approval has fallen significantly since January. It took a real hit during the sequester, and he only holds a 4-point lead over Republicans on who you trust to fix the economy compared to the 18-point lead he held in December. And now he's sort of letting Congress, you folks, duke out the budget. We don't know when he'll present his own budget. And you have White House advisors going out and telling the media that these meetings with you guys have been a joke and for show and a waste of time. Would you have liked to see more leadership from the president on these budgetary issues?
Who knows why somebody's poll ratings go down? I honestly don't. But this is what I can tell you. What the American people want is not just leadership in an abstract way. What they want is leadership that is going to fight for working families in the middle class who are being really devastated as a result of this recession. We don't talk about it enough. But median family income has plummeted, real unemployment over 14%. Millions of people are working for lower wages than they used to. My feeling is that the president will do very well politically when he begins to stand up and say, you know what, I am going to take on Wall Street, and I am going to take on corporate America and all those institutions that think they don't have to pay any taxes. And we are going to raise the minimum wage to a living wage. And we are going to rebuild our infrastructure and put millions of people back to work.
So are you satisfied with the job that he's done on those issues so far?
No. I mean, obviously, he's much, much preferable to Mitt Romney, and I strongly supported him. But, he ran a campaign for the middle class. Well, you tell me. And this is where I think the American people get confused and lose confidence in him. How do you tell me that you're running for the middle class? I'm defending the middle class, the theme of your campaign. Oh, but by the way, I'm going to cut Social Security and disabled veterans' benefits. People don't think that makes a whole lot of sense.
All right, Senator Bernie Sanders from Vermont. Go Catamounts. Thank you for joining us. Coming up, there is some fascinating